Hello everyone and welcome to Ginger Prime. My name's Brian if you're new around here, but if you're a returning subscriber, welcome back, you legendary Endwalking legend. That's what you get for subscribing here, by the way. Free random compliments at the start of these videos. Today we're going to be doing a tier list of the controller style play for each of these jobs. Now I want to say really clearly up front, just note all of these jobs are completely viable on the controller, but I'm going to give my impressions of how they stand a little bit today and how I feel they are going to land in Endwalker, having played the expansion already, and I got a really good feel, especially for jobs like Summoner and how they're going to be reworked and how that feels when playing on a controller. This is also another promise from me to you that I'll be also updating all of my controller guides here for the different jobs as soon as I can. So be sure to be subscribed, be sure to hit that like button on these videos, and maybe consider ringing that bell. That way you don't miss one of these daily uploads. We're going to be diving into, obviously, my opinion. This means that I'm going to be spending a lot of time in Endwalker really rethinking each job. You're going to hear it, obviously, when the rankings fall on you, which jobs I feel are really struggling when it comes to controller support. And with that is also comes my promise that I will be spending a ton of time on those jobs, just like I did with Summoner and Shadowbringers, to really bring you guys the most comfortable and competitive way of playing. Whatever you and however you decide to play this game, whether you're playing it casually or you're playing it hardcore, you should be able to have a really both comfortable experience, but also one that allows you to bring out the best of your class and your identity with your job. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the tier list here. Note these aren't the final ones; these are the stages over here. We have yet to score them. Let's go ahead and start off with obviously my beleaguered Summoner. Summoner, if I was going to score this, I didn't do one of these videos for Shadowbringers. I would have scored Summoner here as an F for just how effing awful it was to play on a controller. It took me 3 months to get it to where I would say maybe it would have been a C or a B at best. Wasn't the most comfortable. And if you were playing on a controller, yes, you were able to do what you needed to do, but when you compared it to every other job out there, it just felt like it needed work. And that's what you were getting in Endwalker. Summoner, I'm going to put it easily as an S tier based off of my time playing it out at the media tour. But beyond playing it at the media tour, it felt so good just to pick it up right away. And I guess that completely negates beyond it. No, like when I sat down and I set up my setup, ran some dungeons, it came together really fast. Really fast. I was like, I'm very comfortable. I'm able to use these abilities. I'm not feeling like I'm missing too much. And that is only going to get better with more practice and some more adjustments when the expansion officially launches here on December the 3rd for early access. So Summoner starts with an S. It gets an S. So I'm very pleased with it. I'm going to go with Paladin. This is probably going to be the most controversial. Who knows? We'll see what happens with later ratings. Everybody's got a strong opinion. I think when it comes to healers, that's where people get the most strong opinion. Right now, Paladin, I would probably rate it as a D. Completely viable. You can do it. I put out the guide on it. And when I think about playing a tank, Paladin ends up being kind of the last place tank for me, not because of it's not awesome, not because of its design. It's because of just, I wish there was a couple of changes that they made to how certain skills maybe upgraded. We see that happening on a lot of the other jobs. So my question was, why not Paladin? Paladin's getting, the competitor spam, which thematically brings it up to just a C, but just speaking on controllers, unfortunately, Paladin's going to have to live here in the D slot. Because those upgrades have yet to happen. But this comes along with the promise of me putting plenty of time into Paladin to see if I can't really kind of rethink how I've done all my controller guides. And so just note for anybody who is following them, the rules, I'm throwing them all out the window. I usually try to focus in on a muscle memory, and I'm sure that's going to creep itself back in. But there we go. We're going to have some fun with that because I want to really try to rethink everything with all the changes coming with the expansion. Let's go ahead and pick a healer. So we got caster, tank, healer. White Mage shouldn't be no surprise. White Mage was incredibly comfortable on Shadowbringers. It's also incredibly comfortable in Endwalker. And then the fact the changes that they made for it just are great. So if you're ever considering like playing out as a healer, it's a great option for you, both in terms of damage and its healing output, when it comes down to where you can put your skills on the bar and not necessarily feel like you're missing out any of those abilities. All right, so we did tank, healer, DPS. Let's go with some of the new jobs. Let's go with Sage. Sage originally gives me the impression that it's going to be quite complex, but the more you dive into the tooltips and the more that you set things up, I think honestly Sage is going to end up rocking out at an A rank, namely because it does have a lot of skills, and when I put more time into it, that I could see that easily jumping up into an S or even a Sid tier in this case. But I felt very good with Sage playing it, and the only questions I had were not really having a full grasp of the understanding, but obviously spending time with the tooltips helps. And when we see what final adjustments are made to these jobs, that's going to help overall with it. All right, so we did that. Let's go with Reaper. Reaper right here. Reaper, I think, is going to be an incredibly fun job to play. I think overall, when we talk about its ranking on a controller itself, might require some macros and how some of the skills work and are currently activated. But overall, like again, if I put in enough time with the job, what I was able to play with it, it felt incredibly comfortable, incredibly fast, and my only gap was coming down into a lack of understanding. I think Reaper is going to be kind of married right up there with the A rank, with the Sage, namely because of its complexity is going to come in the forms of the unknown. But once there's a comfort level there, I'm going to be able to try and start pushing it, and that's going to be one of the fun things that I'm going to bring to you guys as soon as possible, both Sage and Reaper, here on the channel, once we get the Pandemonium raid and once I'm able to really put in the work to make sure that I am not dropping, you know, all of my skills. And the idea is to set up the controller in a way that it is configured so it's easy to access the skills that you need, so you don't end up missing damage burst windows and things like that. All right, so we did a healer and a DPS. Let's come back to the tanks. Warrior, having played it, having really felt just, it feels both beastly and powerful. Warrior is clearly a Sid tier for me in terms of how it's going to play on the controller. Both how it plays today, very simple, easy to use. Wasn't that much fun for me in Shadowbringers, but it clearly way more fun and way easy. Continues to keep that simple approach. If you're struggling with the controller, speaking of which, I should really kind of show you guys this little feature if you guys haven't seen it already. So first and foremost, if you pull up your character configuration and into your hotbar crossbar settings, I'm also using the always display WHB, and also I have my WHXB input timer. That's the extra bars listed here, which you cannot drag and drop onto. You have to use whatever is the linked hotbar, which you can see what is set here with WHXB using directional buttons, hotbar 3 left. So you have to go to set 3 in order to drag and drop and arrange that. But what I'm showing here is that if you're struggling with WHXB, increase your timeout and change this around. That's going to be really helpful for you. There's a lot of settings, and again, we go over those into the controller guides, but hopefully that's going to be a good little tip for you, and that I should, you know, probably have said earlier in the video, but it is what it is. Moving forward, we've got 2 tanks, 2 healers on the board. Let's go ahead and knock out some of our DPS. Black Mage with the Enochian change. Black Mage, I would have put it at a B in Shadowbringers. However, I'm going to go ahead and give it a nice little A rank with the changes, with how spells upgrade. It felt really fast, and I was able to really jump into it, having obviously spent a lot of time on Black Mage in Shadowbringers. Now, that's to be said, I could easily see Black Mage jumping up into an S rank, depending on a couple of ideas I've already had with how the skills will play once Enochian is no longer a skill I need to have on my bar. So just note, I'm excited to bring you guys an updated Black Mage guide. Bard, I honestly would always say Bard is an S rank. Bard on a controller feels really good, really natural, and the changes they've made continue to extend that and hopefully bring itself back some identity to the job itself. I feel like that's going to be really important to the overall health of the job. But just saying that it is a great job to start with, it's a great job to continue with, and as far as your comfort level goes on controller, it really plays out incredibly well with itself. And in fact, actually joining it, I will happily easily say both Machinist and Dancer clearly S ranks with controller play in mind. Their skills are very natural. They feel great to fire off on a controller. And the only exception, and this is where Ninja is kind of strange, and that's why I really am looking forward to seeing what I can do differently with it in Endwalker. I had to change up my controller settings just for Ninja, and Shadowbringers, and thus it didn't end up feeling that like I would have put it in an F. But it's also at the same time, when you think of the controller and your ninjutsu, I think it almost becomes a Sid tier in terms of that. So when I look at it, I'm going to actually give Ninja the Sid tier. And because I think the weaknesses in how I set it up on the controller were due to my own personal restrictions on what changes I was willing to make and was unwilling to make. And having played around a little bit with it and looked around with a little bit with it over other people's coverages since the media tour, I think Ninja is actually going to be in a really great spot for controller players. It's going to feel fast. It's going to feel really connected to your controller, and firing off ninjutsu with the controller is so much easier, when it all comes down to it. In fact, when we look at Monk, Monk in my mind was in a weird spot. I'm really thinking that the changes to Monk are going to overall be very welcome, but this is just on me. So right now I would easily put Monk in the B ranking, and I'm gonna have to put a little time into it to make sure it connects. I am personally torn between B and S with Monk, but B is going to be kind of where it lives to start. I'd like to hopefully revisit this video in the future when I have more time with Monk and the changes that they've made overall to the system. All right, I want to talk about Red Mage. Red Mage is jumping up in here on the Sid tier. Incredibly easy to control on a controller, incredibly easy to get that movement rocking and rolling, incredibly easy to play. And the changes overall that they made Red Mage makes it very easy to set up both an AoE kind of mindset and a single target mindset. And so note that if you are looking at playing on a controller as a caster and you want some movement, you have the options right there between Red Mage, Black Mage, Summoner, all strong options when it comes to the casting crew out there. But Red Mage, I think, takes it because it gives a lot of flexibility, a lot of movement, and that's something that I enjoy playing, this game with, and as a controller player as well. All right. Okay, we've knocked out a good portion of our DPS. Let's bring it back to healers. I'm going to go with Scholar. Scholar, we've lost a lot in terms of our controller play and managing the pet. There's still a little bit of that, but it is much less so. Scholar with the shields and the buffs feels very easy. And honestly, I would probably slot it right here with the Sage in terms of its comfort and its ability use. There's a few things that I think I'm going to change when I get into Endwalker and I start really trying to push Scholar to its max. But as it stands today and what I've played within Endwalker, that's going to be where it lives. I think it's in a strong position, personally speaking. It's very easy to control and use, but ultimately just note that Scholar, I think, can only get better. And I think that's where we're going to have to see how it shakes out in Pandemonium for me. All right, I'm going to go with Astro. This is probably also going to be my other hottest take right here. Astro is going to end up falling into an E slot. The reason being is that how the cards are managed and the changes within the system are going to require me to spend a ton of time with the job. That's not a bad thing. Like putting something in a D&E slot, it's not a bad thing. It's just a comfort level time that I'm going to invest that hopefully you won't have to. So by the time you level up both Paladin and Astrologian, note that there should be a guide out there for you that's going to be able to allow you to take those skills and really maximize your play style with it. Now, as far as it goes in terms of the Scholar, competitively speaking with Sage, White Mage and Sage, White Mage, and Scholar for the Astro, I think is an incredibly good position. So hopefully, if I'm able to really get it to function as best as I can, playing on a controller, we're all going to have a really good time with this job overall. All right, now we've gotten all the healers on the board. Let's go with Dark Knight. Dark Knight, oh man, I really want to give it that Sid tier due to its no longer needing macro a Sacred Soil. The downside about that is obviously now you can't directly place Sacred Soil on where you're going to be. So from an order of operations perspective, it's going to live where it is, but I have to give it a Sid tier. It's a very comfortable job to play on a controller. It's got a lot of things going on for it, and it's not overly complex like how the Paladin ends up functioning. And as you can clearly see right here, these are some really good changes. Now, Gunbreaker got some really good changes as well. However, having played it, I can't go all the way with the Sid tier. I have to go with an S tier for Gunbreaker due to still needing a couple of key features. Now, If I was just raking this off of Shadowbringers, I would have put Gunbreaker at a B, because I did have to use some macros to really get it to function the way I want. But the changes they've made overall, how does some of these abilities work, means that it is actually much easier to use on a controller than it ever has been before. So controller players who love gunbreaking, note that you've got a lot going on for you. Dragoon's in a tricky position. I'm going to actually have to give Dragoon currently the monk treatment in terms of how its rotation and everything functions. Now, that being said, again, with like Dragoon and monk, I think I'll be able to really rethink how I'm doing things, because I did limit myself to how I have these general rules of muscle memory, something that applies across the board, across any job, trying to keep similar jobs in a similar role the same way. But ultimately, when you think about it, like if I'm putting together the guide for itself, I was like, okay, if I'm making it and someone just wants Dragoon, I shouldn't make a guide for somebody who wants to play all of the melees and have that similar. Now, if they're going to do that, maybe there's, a discussion to have, or a second part of that saying, hey, if you're going to play all of these together in this role, maybe make some of these changes so you have some muscle memory. So we're going to end up having a focus, and I think that's going to actually bring up and level up some of these jobs. And then finally, last but not least, Samurai. Samurai on a controller, the way that it's set up, it actually works out incredibly well. There's a couple of changes I would like to make that's going to keep it off of the S and the Sid tier, but I think Samurai can easily slot into an A rank due to just how awesome it is to play. As my voice decides to randomly fail me in this video. Sound off with Brian's Lunas' voice, apparently, in the comments if you made it this far into the video itself. But I think Samurai is a really great choice. It feels incredibly, like, just really well to play. There are some things that I'd like to see adjusted, especially as it relates to getting your sen up and how that rotation works. And I hope that maybe I can explore some of that personally when Endwalker drops on the Samurai itself. But that's what I wanted to share with you guys today. We have done it. We have officially tier listed the controller play and how comfortable it is overall. Now you can see kind of a gap. We don't have any C's, we don't have any F's. All of these jobs are 100% viable in terms of their rankings themselves. But when it comes down to it, if you're just getting started or you're looking at returning, I would definitely recommend White Mage, Warrior, Ninja, Red Mage, Dark Knight, obviously Summoner, Bard, Machinist, Dancer, Gunbreaker as some real big winners in terms of comfort and being able to jump in and slot in and really get comfortable with them. Guys, if you're looking for any more controller support guides and more, you can always check one of the links in the description for the Final Fantasy playlist, which should help get you to what you need, whether that's a dedicated class job guide or the ultimate controller guide, which should be also linked in the content of this video itself. Thank you everybody for being here. Thanks for being awesome. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a like. Otherwise, you can always hit that dislike button, or you can always leave me a comment. Let me know what you'd like to see here more on the channel. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks for being awesome. Love you faces. Hopefully I'll see you in my next video, but until then, take care.
Friendly, fun, and optimistic community, baby. Coming from an MMO community filled with toxicity, this is an amazing breath of fresh air. Keep it up, baby. Oh, yeah. I just want to say I'm really glad you're feeling